This is the Bottom Shot Podcast.
Pulvereri is up high. They come out of turn number 4. Stutter between the turns. The fans come to their feet.
It is Ted Christopher still in command. Keith Rocco right there on his back bumper.
Bringing Stafford Motor Speedway's past and present together.
They are side by side running for the finish line. It's a photo finish.
Deep into turn number 3. He goes in deeper than most. Christopher is in trouble. It is Keith Rocco to slingshot to the bottom, and he'll take down the win.
A Stafford Motor Speedway production where we will hear from the personalities from the past and present that found success on the legendary half-mile oval.
The scoreboard shows goose eggs as they wait. It's Pulvereri. He wins it by inches over Richie Evans in the Spring Sizzler.
Unbelievable chain of events.
Now, here are your hosts, Paul Arute and Kyle Rickey. Welcome to another edition of the Bottom Shot Podcast here from the Stafford Motor Speedway. Kyle Rickey joined once again by Paul Arute. And Paul, we're in the home stretch of winter, hopefully, as we get set to begin another racing season here at Stafford. Like usual, more announcements on the horizon here at the Stafford Speedway looking ahead to 2021. Let's talk, before we talk about the SRX series, new sponsor coming on board once again, Paradiso Insurance. I know they've been involved here in the past, and they have upped the ante again in 2021.
Yeah, we're excited to bring on a great local Stafford business. They've been, a cornerstone in downtown Stafford for a long, long time. So it's great to have a great partner in them, and they've signed on to our late Model 50 as well as a third place contingency bonus, and it's a multi-season agreement. So we're excited to continue to grow the late model class, and it's going to be a great season again, and that division's come a long way.
It has. Yeah. It has. It's gone from 16, 17 cars
Not
to
even. Yeah.
26, 28 cars in a weekly.
Good field.
And so we want to welcome Paradiso, literally a cornerstone business. They are on the corner
of Main Street,
down in Main Street in Stafford Springs. So welcome them on board for 2021 and beyond. SRX continues to expand their field. Michael Waltrip, the latest driver, announced to the lineup, multi-time Daytona 500 winner. Young fans now know Michael as a NASCAR on Fox commentator.
Another great addition to the field. He's getting a lot of beef online. He always gets beat up, but Waltrip, Labonte, Castroneves, Stewart. They're coming to Stafford Speedway on June 12th. You can't make that up.
Nope.
You look back a year ago and you say, hey, the SRX might come to Stafford. And you're like, oh, okay, it might be Tony, it might be a couple big names, but it's crazy. And there's still additional names that are expected to be added, as well as the Ringer car, which could be anyone from Kyle Busch to Denny Hamlin. Who knows?
Who do you want to see come up?
I'm not going to pick favorites, but if I had to pick, Dale Jr., of course.
Absolutely.
But I don't think he's going to. You never know, though. I won't put it past Smoke to convince somebody like Dale to hop in the car.
Any word on who the local guy might be?
I haven't heard too much about it, but I know the talk was either Keith or Doug, Kobe, possibly both. So, that sounds like it's still coming together. Hopefully we'll have some info on that in the next couple of months or so. So
that event scheduled for Saturday, June 12th, the day after the Twisted Tea 80 for the Tour Type Modifieds. Where are we with as far as ticket sales and the number of tickets that you have sold? I believe you sold out of the allotment that you are currently allowed to sell for that event based on regulations.
For that event, we have sold out of we sold about 30% of capacity, which was what we ended the 2020 season at. And if anything, if the capacity amount changes before then, we'll definitely sell as many as we can. And we encourage everyone to go online, sign up. There's a wait list on StaffordSpeedway.com. And if they become available, if you're on that list, you'll be the first to know.
Listening to the governor this week, he's optimistic about graduations and being able to have graduation events at full capacity. Well, June 12th is right in the middle of graduation season, so let's hope.
I hope so, because I mean, we could have a full packed stand here, and I'm also excited for the SK All-Star event.
Absolutely,
because,
the same night.
That's going to be a great show. I mean, we're still kind of playing around with what the format is going to be, but it's a $20,000 a purse, so that isn't a slouch. It's going to be a 50-lap event. There's going to be some breaks, some inverts. There's going to be some all-star madness. So I'm excited to have the SKs alongside the SRX.
I have a great idea I want to run by you on how to determine the starting lineup for that event, but we'll do it off air.
I can only imagine.
Before we bring in our guest, let's talk about opening weekend. I believe tickets just went on sale for opening weekend, which is
March 1st.
March 1st. So
yes.
Coming up here in about a week.
Yeah. So we're going to have – it's the same thing as the SRX event. We're going to allot a certain amount of general admission tickets available for both of those days. They're going to be separate tickets. And I think there's been some questions about if we're going to ever go back to a 2-day ticket. And it's easier for us to do and to make sure both days have strong cards.
Yep.
Saturday we added the Granite State Pro Stocks, which already has 22 cars that are signed up, including some of the top dogs. We got Joey Pole, DJ Shaw. There's going to be a lot of Stafford guys that are going to be attempting that event. So the two separate events, the two separate tickets allows for a better product on both days. So March 1st, pop online and get your tickets.
See the tickets and all of the information regarding those events on Saturday, April 24th, opening day, and the Spring Sizzler for the Napa Auto Parts Spring Sizzler on Sunday, April 25th. Crown Jewel, absolutely. There's the trophy right there. Let's talk about our guest today, somebody that's been around this racetrack for quite some time, as is the norm on this show, as we like to talk to a lot of the veteran drivers with all the stories, and this guy should have a lot of them.
Dan Avery, yeah, he's a great, he's been around Stafford and the modifieds in forever, since the early 80s. So excited to get Dan's stories and even talk about the time he almost purchased Stafford Speedway, which is a story I've always wanted to get down.
Apparently came that close, according to an article.
According to these documents I have in front of me, so it should be a good one.
One of the first winners ever in the SK Modified division as well, back in 1982, has found so much success, continues to find success here as a car owner. Dan Avery joins us here on the Bottom Shot Podcast in a moment. Back here at the Stafford Motor Speedway, and as promised, a longtime competitor here at the track and now owner, Dan Avery, joins us. Dan, welcome to the Bottom Shot Podcast.
Nice to be here.
Let's jump right into it. You've been around this racetrack for a long time, one of the first winners in the SK Modifieds. We'll talk about that in a moment, but what got your interest peaked in motorsports all those years ago?
Actually, way back when I was probably 7, 8 years old, my uncle and my dad used to take me down to Riverside Speedway, and I got hooked. I just, from childhood, and my hero down there was Billy Greco. Great competitor, and I got to meet him and stuff, which was, later in life, which was really cool. And it just, going to the track, I used to hear the cars on the racetrack, and my heart would get pumping, and it just grabbed a hold of me and sucked me in, and it's one of those things that gets a hold of you and it just never leaves you, seems like.
We get that.
Oh yeah. So as a kid, you go to the track, hooked immediately. How do you progress into becoming a driver? Is it just as a kid you do it when you're like 16, or does it take a little bit of time?
Actually, I used to sit in the stands and watch those guys race, and I envisioned myself being in the seat racing with those guys, and I felt like, of course, as a kid you have an imagination, right?
Yeah.
But I felt like I could drive with those guys, and as years went by, it got heavier. It got more passionate about wanting to do it, and so I started with the sport of snowmobile racing. So my dad was a snowmobile dealer. We used to sell skidoos. And then, I got competitive, and we started racing skidoos, and I did that for a while when I was like 15, 16, 17 years old. But the hook never let go of me for the auto racing, And the funny part about it is that there's a name that goes way back, Tommy Hughes. You may remember him. He was from the Plainville Stadium days, but I met him through snowmobile racing, and because he was involved in it, and I've come to find out that he was racing cars, and he says, "Oh, Dan," he says, "it's much safer than snowmobile racing." He says, "You need to go car racing." So those words never left me. I always thought about that, and then some years went by with the snowmobile racing. When I was 17, 18, the economy kind of went down. Dad said, "We're not going to do the racing anymore," and so we just didn't do anything for 3 or 4 years, but I kept going as a spectator to the races, and I just really wanted to do this. And I think it was the end of 1978, I had been coming up here, and I was watching the Limited Sportsman's, and Mike Stefanik was like top of the game.
Yeah, he was good.
Yeah, and and I used to get the New England Speedway scene. And I'd just always be looking cover to cover, And there was a classified ad, Mike Stefanik selling his car.
Wow.
And
That's cool.
Wow. I said, maybe this is an opportunity. Maybe these guys, because I had no, people in racing, car racing at the time that I could go and talk to and lean on and say, how do I get into this? So I just literally answered a classified ad. And went up and saw Richie Kearns, which was his crew chief and co-owner of the car, and Mike, and we made a deal, $1,500, and I had no motor.
It's a winning car, right?
And a winning car.
No motor, okay.
So I said, okay, now what do? I got to get a motor. I go down to the junkyard. I get a motor, and my dad and I rebuilt it in the basement of our house, and open trailer, no tools. I mean, just went at it.
And you found success in that car. But first off, describe that car, those days, that division just in general.
What was the car? Yeah, I mean, those cars were so cool.
Yeah, it was that particular car was a Pontiac GTO, 1969 Pontiac GTO, full frame, big, heavy car. But they had small block Chevys with big carburetors on them.
Okay.
So they produced pretty good power.
Yeah.
And we ran on those 8-inch M&H tires. And
the hard ones, right? Those things were like recaps, right?
Yeah, they were pretty hard. But that first year was a real learning curve for me. Just getting familiar with being on the pavement and circling the track and finding. First time I drove onto the track, I said, "What am I doing?" I didn't even know where to be.
Stafford?
It was Stafford.
Okay, so your first time out there, you're just.
This is where I started.
Wow.
And I'm like, I go out there and I'm like, this place is huge. I didn't even know where to go. I'm like, bottom, top. The green flag comes out. I'm all over the place. I didn't know where the heck to be, And finally, by the end of the season, I was running some top tens. And I said, when I started that whole deal, I said, all I want to do is finish a race in the top 10. That's all I cared. That was my goal. Finish a race in the top 10. And, so we finished several races in the top 10. And then the following year, we bought another ex-Mike Stefanik race car. That car was the ticket. That one was really good. And we won 4 features in
that was
1980.
1980, yeah.
Yeah.
What was who was, besides Mike, who were some of the names in that division? That kind of was a ladder for a lot of guys.
Yeah, it was Pete Fiandaca. Jerry Marquis was in it. Tommy Bowles. Actually, let me rewind back a little bit. In 1979, it was Brian Bowles.
Oh, okay.
And interesting thing is, of my very first race, somehow Brian and I found ourselves on the front row on the start of the race.
Your first ever race?
First race.
The handicapping system
works,
I guess.
I don't know how that happened, but I was on the front row. And, of course, back then they had light poles in the infield with a big concrete barrier around it. Well, I found that barrier that day right on the green flag. Brian and I came together, and I spun through the grass, and I plowed into light pole barrier and took out the fender, and I said, geez, that might be the end of my racing career.
So your first race, you don't even complete your first lap.
Correct.
Wow.
A little rough start.
Let's talk about the brighter times, though, and talk about the first win. What
that was
the win
amazing.
number one at Stafford Speedway like?
I'm pretty sure it was a 4th of July race.
Yep.
I think it was.
No, it was the second win. I got here June 13th is the first. The second was July 4th.
Okay, all right. So that was like my big win. Was
the
July.
4th was always a big night.
And that's why I always told people that my lucky night was Friday the 13th.
There you go. Yeah,
was my first win. But yeah, I remember that. It was really like heart pounding for me. I'm finally get into the lead. I'm leading the race, and my heart's about to pump out of my chest. I said, I am going to win my first race. And took my whole family, and we went and celebrated afterwards. We went down to East Windsor, down the Windsor Grill, and we had dinner afterwards, and it was just a great night.
Did the win kind of cement the, addiction, right? You're like, you're in, you're hooked. I mean, I'm doing this. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of the time.
Absolutely. I mean, once that happens, I guess it's sort of like a drug thing. It just gets a hold of you, and kept setting goals, right? So remember, I started out just wanting to finish top 10, and then here I am, second year I win a race, and then the second one comes right after that in July. It was seemed like it was not easy. Don't get me wrong, but I had early success.
Yeah, which always is a big contributor for people committing to the sport. I mean, if you click off 4 wins in your second or third of the season, I mean, you must be feeling pretty good about yourself.
Yeah, it was real. But, I guess to give myself credit, I went out and purchased 2 really good cars.
Yeah.
Gave myself a good
opportunity.
chance. Yeah. So that was a big help.
And so you purchased 2 Stefanik cars. He's Hall of Famer. He's one of the all-time greats in New England. Did he kind of give you some support as well, some advice along the way, or how did you kind of perfect the craft of driving those really challenging cars?
Absolutely. Mike helped me out getting started, and Richie Kearns was even a bigger help because he would help me with setup. Mm-hmm. I didn't have a clue. I mean, I didn't know anything about air pressures, stagger, setting the car up on scales or any of that stuff. I just basically I took the car back to my shop, and I didn't turn any screws. I just left it alone and just said, where do I set the air pressures? Yeah. But every once in a while, as time went by, I got 2 scales. I couldn't afford 4 scales. I got 2, and I would put blocks of wood in the front wheels and put the 2 scales in the back, and then move it around and put it in the front, and I'd record my numbers and work. I started with nothing. Yeah. It's like I had a garage with a dirt floor, no heat, and a $99 Craftsman tool set.
Wow.
That was how I started. I had like no money behind me at all.
So at this point, you're winning. It's still the early 80s, right? 1980, 81 here at Stafford. You run a NASCAR North race at Thompson. Where's the goals shifting? Because we all know what happened in 82. You went ultimately to the modifieds. But
I got to interrupt you. How do you know that I ran a NASCAR North race?
I did my research.
It's online.
Really?
Yeah.
I could tell you where you finished, too.
Yeah, and who was in the race? Because it was won by Dick McCabe, who held off Beaver Dragon and Dave Dion. You ended up 26th. The internet is undefeated.
Wow.
We'll teach you how to use the whole www.
But wait, there's a story about that race.
And I'd love to hear it. That's why we are here.
So my car got wrecked here at Stafford. It was, if I remember right, that Thompson race was like near the end of the year.
It was, yeah.
And my car got wrecked, and Mark Peachy had Randy LaJoy driving his car, blue number 87. And my car was wrecked, and Randy had blown up his motor. So my uncle, being my uncle, went down and talked to the Peachys and said, hey, your motor's blown up, and Dan's car is wrecked. What do you say we get together? I said, okay. He brought the car up to my shop. We put my motor in. Came to Stafford. I'm pretty sure it's one of those in 1980. We won. Never drove that car. Randy had not won in it all year. We put my motor in it and won the race.
Huh.
And we were hooked after that as as a team.
Oh, wow.
But we took that car to Thompson and ran that. It was number 87.
Yep.
And we actually had that car running 10th with, like, I don't know, 15 or 20 laps to go. But the oil pan, we had a wet sump, and the oil pan was bumping on the track, and it created a hole after a while, and it started leaking oil. So I had to pull in.
Wow. And so were the sportsman cars easily converted?
Yes.
To the same car? Or
They were
how does that? What was the difference there?
They were very close. The only thing we needed to do is change from the 8-inch tires to the 10-inch tires.
Oh, okay.
The NASCAR North ran the, I think
Which,
it was.
it's easier for you if you're getting the bigger tire.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
yeah.
that was an easy change.
But, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, I'm actually in the race, and I'm finding myself in the top 10. I'm saying, how could this be? You know? And the other ones that I remember being in the race was, if I remember correctly, was Ronnie Bouchard and Jeff Bodine were in that race.
Yep.
I mean, those were some stacked fields of cars in those events. And actually, Randy was just on Dale Jr.'s podcast talking about his time in that series, which was cool.
Yeah.
But I want to kind of touch on some more here. So the 1980s at Stafford was kind of an interesting time, and I always like to get what was the vibe like at the track? Kind of like what was the feeling of the drivers, and like how was the crowd? Like kind of what was the Stafford vibe then? Like the racing vibe.
I mean, it was incredible. I think those were incredible times. It's just the stands were always packed, and it was. You didn't see so many gray hairs in the grandstands as you do now.
Hey, we're getting
on that.
we're getting. There's a lot of kids now too. There's a lot of the teenagers are coming back.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Glad to hear that. But it was, and the names, and it seemed like, not to put anything down at the national level, but it just seemed like this was the heartbeat of New England racing, and it was the modifieds. You know, you had Maynard Troyer and the Bouchards and the Bodines and Evans, all those guys, and it just seemed like it was the top tier. If you ran Stafford and Thompson in the modifieds, it was like top tier racing, and the crowd showed it. It was just, I can remember being here at the Spring Sizzler where people were sitting on the grass down below the grandstand because there was no room in the seats.
Yeah. Some crazy pictures.
I know.
Yeah.
Still is a pretty strong heartbeat. Like a really strong heartbeat.
I mean, it's pretty
all
good
these
right
years
now
later.
too.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I don't think you'll ever see anything the same as in any sport like it was in the 1980s. Because I mean, it's just a different era.
Yep.
Now you can watch Dan Avery live on Flow TV
racing.
on your computer every Friday night. So it's just very different now.
It is different.
Yeah. But you kind of touched on the modifieds being the pinnacle, which I think we all kind of talk about when we talk to Bugsy on the show or talk to anybody. Was your goal ever to kind of get there, or was it I'm cool with being in these stock cars?
I got to be honest with you. I was running limited sportsman for those years, and I used to be done with my race, and I would come up there and I'd watch these guys come barreling into their first turn, and Ray Miller and these guys, and I said, no, there's no way. I'm not brave enough for these cars.
It's crazy.
But
that's how it is still. I go up there and I go, I could never do that.
But you're doing it, right?
I'm not modified. I'm not driving a modified.
No, but eventually I found myself in it, and it's just like I said, it's one of those things that grabs a hold of you, and the speeds look more incredible from the outside than when you're in the seat. I mean, you've heard this story over and over and over again. I mean, we're all going the same place at pretty much the same speed. So the relative to the speed is not that great till you step out of the car and you go, wow.
I mean, it's incredible to watch in the
Yeah.
stands every week. Even in the SKs, it's just like, how the heck do they going into the first corner, 26 cars? All it takes is a rookie on the front row to make a mistake.
Right? But I can remember running an SK race, not to get too far off track, and it was so intense. There was just this one race one time, and we were like, two by two, all in a pack for like 15 laps, and everybody was full pin, and you just couldn't pass, but everybody was
Just there.
just there, and the yellow finally came out, and we all stopped. It was a red flag,
You
actually.
hold your breath.
And I pulled up next to Woody Pitcat. He goes, "Are you kidding me?" He says, "I lost my breath in that deal."
You're out of breath.
Because it was so intense,
Yeah.
and you couldn't make a mistake, and you're side by side with another guy, and there's bumper behind you and in front of you.
Yeah.
It's just wow. I guess you could relate it to like restrictor plate racing at Daytona.
I mean, that's
Or the
what
SK lights here.
SK, yeah, I mean, that's why the SKs are unbelievable because the racing, it just puts your jaw on the floor.
Oh,
You just
yeah.
can't believe it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the modifieds. 1982 rolls around. You transition to a new division here at the Stafford Motor Speedway. Kind of bring us behind the scenes of what you saw here at Stafford and the discussions that you might have been involved in bringing this new modified to Stafford
It could be
Speedway in
unfiltered
1982.
too.
Going to be unfiltered?
I mean, we've had plenty. We talk about the pro stocks getting tossed out. We
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about the SKs coming in. We
Well,
talk about it all on the show.
Actually, if I remember right, in the fall of '81, we started to hear rumors that limited sportsmans were going to be discontinued. Of course, that just pisses everybody off when you
Sure.
get rid of a division, right? But sometimes it's for the greater good, right? So my car was wrecked. It didn't matter. My limited
You were
sportsman.
right.
So we started hearing those rumors, and then I don't remember exactly how it happened. I think we either got a phone call or a letter. I guess it was maybe it was an ad in like Speedway Scene. It was going to be a meeting up here at the clubhouse in Stafford. There's going to be this new division they wanted all the competitors to be at this meeting. And your grandfather was here, Jack, and Ed Yarrington was here, and Dan Pardee, if I remember correctly.
God, if only this room could talk.
And oh my God, there's so much. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to happen.
I don't think a lot of people wanted to talk.
But we had this meeting, and they were talking about the division. They said basically it's going to be hand-me-down modifieds, and with a variation. Certain transmissions and you couldn't have the big high-dollar brakes. We were going to run on a McCreary tire instead of the Goodyears or Firestones or whatever they were at the time. And it was going to be like a stock motor, steel-headed motor, a two-barrel carburetor and all of this stuff. And it all sounded pretty cool. And then they were asking, they had a little ballot, if I remember right, to fill in a suggested name for the division. I think like hundreds went in, but we didn't get to choose. It was your grandfather.
Yeah, that's a good story.
His
Yeah.
wife, I believe, came up.
Yeah, and
with-
it means nothing, which is
Right.
It's funny because it's just such a natural thing now, SK modified. But
Yep.
was the vibe in that meeting positive?
Yeah, I got the gist that it was,
Yeah.
if I remember
Well,
right.
this is before they decide to get rid of the modified. So they were going to be side by side for a couple of
That's
seasons.
right.
So the anger came later.
That's right. When they announced that they were getting rid of the
Yeah.
full-blown modifieds. That was like mid-'80s, if I remember.
think it was 80, 85, 86 because
Yeah.
there was a Sizzler
Yep.
with just the SKs,
Yes.
which was a
Was it
disaster.
87-ish?
Which was it had to be done, I guess, which is how the story goes. But it almost bankrupted Stafford Speedway, which I think we'll get to next in a little bit here.
Right,
but,
right.
But so you decided to join this SK division.
Yes.
What was the car you got? How did it come together? And what was the first season at Stafford like here?
So, kind of an interesting story. I had gotten to know Don FLYNN only because he was nearby and he owned a modified. And in the fall of, if I'm making the stories too long, just cut me off. But in the fall of '81, I guess it was, I was at his shop and I was bugging him and I said, "I got my helmet, got my suit. Hey, let me give me a chance in the blue 25, if you remember that car. It was a Troyer car." And we went to Thompson, and I went to Thompson, and he was there. He was waiting for Greg Sachs to drive that car, and he didn't show up, and he let me drive it in practice and qualifying, and I didn't make the race, but that's another story. But it led me to get to know Don FLYNN, and somehow there was an involvement with Brett Bodine. And Brett's quality medal number 4 was sitting in Don Flynn's garage. And I walked in there when I was talking to Don. I go, what's the deal with this car? He goes, that's for sale. I don't know who actually owned it, if it was Brett's owner or if Don owned it, but it had been renumbered to 25. I made a deal on that car. I bought that car through Don Flynn or from Don Flynn or whatever, and then Brett helped me out a little bit with setup. And, we had to make, that was a chassis dynamics. At the time, it was called a Bodine chassis because Jeff Bodine had designed that chassis.
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
No.
Yeah, it was called Bodine, B-O with a dash, D-Y-N, Bodine chassis. And Bob Cuneo was involved. And they helped me get the car rigged up because the motor had to be raised up for SK because we had a wet sump pan and so on and so forth. But long and the short of it is they got me set up with that car, and we changed. That's when it goes back to the Peachy story, Mark Peachy, with a number 87. That's why my SK was number 87, because we kept that alliance going, and that was a really fast car. That's one disappointment with the inaugural race. I was leading that race, and the car overheated. And
really?
John St. Angelo ended up winning it. I came back second and third week and won 2 in a row.
Yeah, you won on May 14th and May 21st in 1982.
Yeah.
Second in the second SK winner of all time. It's cool.
Yep. What was race 1 like? Outside of your mechanical issues.
It's a good question. Like, what was the racing like?
It was, it's like any other startup division. There was a big disparity in the speeds. You had some cars that I happened to get lucky. My car was really fast right out of the box. It was probably the fastest car. And there was probably 3 or 4 others as fast as ours. But it was a wide disparity to the back of the field. I mean, they were some of the guys who were like 2 or 3 seconds off the pace.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
There was a lot of
smash
wrecking.
And crash came into existence.
It wasn't so much in the beginning though, because everybody was timid, you know what I mean? But as everybody got comfortable and racy, the division got really rough. It was bad. Yep. A lot of wrecking.
And then so you continue in that division for a couple of seasons, correct?
Yes.
And then do you transition over to the modifieds? How does that work?
So we ran the SKs in 82, but I got an opportunity. I know these stories are long, but I got
good. This is the point of a podcast. There's no rules. You can go for an hour or 5 hours. It doesn't matter.
So somehow through Stan Saban, Sly they call him, right? Jeb Belize was racing Bush North, but he was getting out of it or something, and he had a small block Chevy that was all built up. It was a little 355, and he said, "Hey, if you want to run the Spring Sizzler as a modified in 1983, it's a wet sump and stuff like that, but it might be pretty good." So we actually put that motor in that car. And we went to the Spring Sizzler in 1983 as a modified, not an SK. And I ran the non-qualifier race with Jimmy Spencer. And in order to get into the main event, you had to finish first or second.
Yeah.
I finished second to Jimmy Spencer.
Yeah.
Started dead last in the Spring Sizzler.
And what'd Spencer end up doing? Blast his way through. I think he won, right?
No, he didn't win that one.
That was the next year he won.
It was the next year. Once again, I had you could choose tire compounds. I had the hard tire compound on for that race. And I just stayed out of trouble and rode. And I feel like I didn't even hardly pass anybody, but guys would back up and they would start pitting. And I was running 5th with 5 laps to go and ran out of gas.
Was that your first Sizzler?
It was my first Sizzler, first modified race ever.
So you're going against the greats, like Evans is in that race, Troyer's in that race, Bodine's probably in that race, right? I mean, that's a lot.
There was a lot of stout competition, right?
Wow.
But my guys had miscalculated. They forgot to think about the laps that we ran in a non-qualifier race, and it was like no time to get ready to go right into the main. It was, it was like they ended a non-qualifier race, and it was like, okay, get out there and line up and go. I'm like, okay. Well, they didn't put enough gas in, and I ran out of gas with 5 laps to go.
What could have been?
It could have been.
Jamie Tomano won that race.
Jamie Tomano did,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
But Spencer, they think the following, he won in '84, I believe, and that was when the story of Spencer smashing his way through the non-qualifier. Actually, that was probably the same event that you were in when he smashed his way.
Could be.
That's the classic. Oh, Jimmy Spencer came to Stafford and hit everybody in the non-qualifiers race.
Yeah, he used to tell me, and he told many others, oh, my foot slipped off the brake.
I would love to have him on this show.
Well,
we got to get him
we'll work
on.
Oh, yeah, he'd be entertaining.
MRN, the company I work for, Motor Racing Network, covered the Sizzler for a couple of years and those non-qualifiers races, and I've listened to some of them. They seem like they were pretty wild.
They were pretty wild.
Yeah.
The parts peddler non-qualifiers
Yes.
events.
So next season is the 50th Spring Sizzler, which is incredible, and I think it should go back to 80 laps. I don't know what. I mean,
Yes. That was good times.
Yeah.
That 80-lap race was. And now, if I remember right, I don't know if they counted yellows. That was the only thing.
No, I don't think so.
I think it was 80 green flags.
Yeah.
That was
like
how it was
it is,
built.
which is why we have the Open 80s, which is kind of how that came about. Yeah.
Right. It was a good theme because it was 80 green flags laps of racing.
You got to go.
Yeah, you got to go.
So you're in the mod now, and now you kind of transition away from the SKs. Where does Ted Christopher appear in your life here? I mean, the story is that you guys kind of connected in a way, and kind of talk us through that.
Yeah, I think it was, I want to say, more like 85-ish.
Okay, so it was a little bit
bit
down the line.
later.
Okay.
If I remember right, I had been coming up to Stafford because I think by now I'm in the full modifieds and I'm running Riverside because they couldn't afford to run the full modifieds up here.
Okay.
It just was a financial thing. And I come up here and I met Teddy Christopher and he's struggling. And he's got Randy LaJoie's old car. That's what it is. And one of his cars from Dan Avery or something. And he's struggling with it, and I don't even know why. I just walked over and started talking to those guys and got to know him a little bit, and he's just super down to earth kind of guy, And he says, I don't know, Dan. He knew me. I'm really struggling here. I go, I'll tell you what. Why don't you bring your car after this is over? Come down during the week. Bring your car over to my shop. I said, I'll help you out. We'll go through it. We'll scale the car. It was a mess. Mm-hmm. I mean, we took the brakes off, and they were all froze up. The pistons were all froze up. So we freed that all up and sanded stuff down and got things fixed up. And he had springs all backwards, and shocks were bent, and just a mess. Huh. So we got that all squared away and got it straightened out. And we went up the following Friday, and he went on practice. I said, how's it feel? He goes, I don't know. I haven't driven one of these very much. He goes, do you want to take it out in a heat race? I go, are you sure? Why would you want, He goes, well, you've been in these cars. You know what? All right. I go out in the heat race, and I win the heat race. They're announcing Ted Christopher wins this heat race. It's just funny. Back in those days, you could do that kind of stuff, right? Yeah. So I come in, and he's like cheering, jumping up and down. He's like a car owner, He's like, this is great. So now his confidence is up because he feels like he's got a car, right? And I think it was maybe just a few weeks later he won his first race.
Wow. That's an awesome story.
Yeah. So that kind of brings me to, how I don't know if you want me to tell this story.
Yeah,
but
we can jump ahead a while, but
yep.
you do go away for a while, at least from Stafford, but you're still involved in the sport, but then you come back.
Well, 2004, I basically retired from racing. I ran my last tour race up at Thompson in 2004. And at the end of, I think it was 2009, I'm walking around the pit area, and Teddy sees me. He goes, what are you doing? He goes, you ain't here just to watch. He goes, if you're going to do something, he says, before you do anything, come see me. I go, okay. So we looked around and talked to people and answered some classified ads.
Mm-hmm.
And we go down to Teddy's shop, and beautiful shop, and he's got like 7 cars lined up in a row right there, you know. And he goes, if you really want to do something, he says, that's my 2007 championship car right there. He goes, why don't you just take that one right there and go race? He said, just bring it home, work on it, take care of it, and bring it back the way you found it.
Wow.
I'm like, are you kidding me? He goes, listen, you helped me out
Wow.
when I needed help. He says, this is my way,
And
give
this
it
is
back.
20-plus years
I
later.
love
Yes.
that. That's so cool.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. And you come back, and is that the car you eventually get back to victory lane with? Is it
Yes.
a different car? It's the same
No,
car.
actually, take that back. We came close. I think we finished second with that car. But it wasn't until we purchased a new car, I think it was in 2012.
You won, yeah,
won
you're
in 2013.
2013 you won.
All right, so it was the new car that we won the race with.
I love that story. I mean,
Yep.
I think we try and tell it at the track a bunch too, because it's just so cool.
Yeah.
Like, you can't make that up.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, and that just, you know, a lot of the critics see Teddy as just a hard-nosed, like, don't give a shit kind of racer, right?
Mhm.
But behind the scenes, he had a heart like as big as this table. He was just amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, good guy.
Let's go back to the mid-'80s. A lot of transition in modifieds. We already talked about what happened here in 81, 82 with the SKs coming in. 85, the tour forms.
Well, 86 the tour started, I believe. Or 85.
85.
85?
85.
86.
Richie Evans was the
came back
first
here.
champion posthumously. Came back here in 86, I think.
Yeah.
You would know.
I don't know, I
You
guess.
weren't
'Cause I said
around.
85. I was wrong.
I think it was 85.
Yeah.
85. What's the vibe in modified racing during that time where it goes from go run 4 or 5 nights a week and try to get as many points as you possibly can at all these different racetracks that are NASCAR paying points to this tour format, which ultimately you competed in 147 times. What was the vibe in the modified community during that time when all this change is happening?
Yeah. Well,
And if it's I hated Jackaroo, then you can say it.
no. It wasn't that. I was pretty much committed to running the Riverside Park Speedway. So those early years of the tour seemed unattainable for me. You know, it was just not affordable. So I didn't get a good sense for those early years, but NASCAR at that time seemed like they were elevating the mods quite rapidly from what I was seeing from my perspective. And I mean, it seemed like television was starting to be talked about more. We were going to some bigger and better places. I mean, we've always gone to Martinsville, but I mean, I think Richmond was starting to come into play. And when did we go to Watkins Glen?
It was in the mid-'90s.
Mid-'90s. That's when I feel like the modified tour really hit its stride, was mid-'90s. That was like the big heydays of the tour.
Mike Stefanik, Tony Hirschman, Steve Park era, Rick
Yeah.
Fuller.
Yes, very much so.
But so in that time, though, in the 80s, Stafford drops the modifieds, kind of spurs this.
Yes.
I mean, back to Kyle's question, I'd love to get what was the feeling? I mean, that's just, I think, is interesting.
Well, at that time, I got to be honest with you, the scuttlebutt that I was hearing when we heard about they were dropping the modifieds out and the SKs were going to be the premier division, I said, it's the end of modified racing.
Wow.
It really, that's kind of what everybody was
Thinking.
Yeah. You know, it's like, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
What are they doing?
Yeah.
So
But
at that point, go ahead, keep going.
But I know that your grandfather had a vision.
I guess.
He was trying to make it
We're
affordable.
still sitting here, I guess.
You know, it's just.
Yeah.
And here we are. I mean,
Yeah.
the weekly division is now the SKs, and the tour is the tour.
Yep.
It was the beginning of the separation of weekly racing and tour racing.
And at this point, you're at Riverside Park.
Yep.
What's the fields like there?
Great fields. Great promoter. Ben Dodge was number one, in my opinion, for taking care of the competitors and the fans. And he would make it a show.
Give some examples. I've heard the stories all the time about Ben and Riverside, but haven't really heard a lot of the detail about how did he make it a show.
Well, I guess it was a show for everybody. Yeah. I mean, he would find every corner to make it happen. So, for instance, we would run a heat race. You'd have to, the first 2 or 3 cars would have to pull up on front of the grandstands, and they had the banners come out. He had sponsors for each race, first, second, and third, and put the banner out and take pictures. So he was making the sponsors feel really special. Bonus money for the guy that won the heat race. So that made the competitors feel special. Not so sure the fans liked that so much because it seemed like it would slow the show down a little bit. But, man, I tell you what, the cars were coming out right away, and it was done fast. And then, like when the tour races would show up, he did this like Hollywood-style thing where he would darken the whole stadium. All the cars would already be lined up. And then he had the spotlights up in the grandstands shining down as they were announcing the drivers. And he had these glamour girls with their sparkly dresses
on. Yeah, I've heard the showgirl stories. Yeah.
And it was just a show. It was a spectacular thing to see. And then green flag would come out and all the fireworks would start they did it on the backstretch on the river. And he just made quite the spectacle out of it. It was showmanship at its finest.
Yeah. And we talked about it a bit with Todd Owen. When it closed down, it was like devastating for people.
Oh,
it was just like somebody died.
Yeah.
Were you still there weekly then?
No, I wasn't there. My last weekly event, I think, was around 90. Well, it might have been the year before, 98. But, it's funny because you get caught up in the racer mentality, and I was on the tour pretty heavy. Mm-hmm. And my wife asked me, Laura, and she says, "You're going to miss Riverside when it closes." I go, "Nah, I'm not going to miss that place." I said, I've been there, done that. I'm on the tour, racer mentality. But she was right. She was right. I missed that place.
Were you there the final weekend?
I didn't go.
Wow.
Yeah, I just didn't go.
I mean, the way Todd described it last night there, he was like, it sounded like a funeral. Mm-hmm. And it was just like eerie because I can just picture if that ever happened to Stafford. Just weird to even think that. I mean, it's not going to happen, but I'm not going to let it happen, but it's just weird. Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely a tough time.
Yeah.
And I think probably that's why I stayed away. I just didn't want to go.
And so we're going to, talking on the promoter standpoint, there's an interesting story that Kyle didn't even know, and we pulled out some old documents. Dan Avery almost owned, or actually technically did own Stafford Speedway for a very short period. Was it 88, I believe?
Yeah, I can only remember 80s.
Consult the documents.
Yeah.
1988.
Yeah, so
in an article I think written by Matt Buckler.
Yeah.
So kind of how did this come up? Why did you want to be a racetrack promoter? First of all,
I think I was looking at it as a way of continuing my involvement in the sport for a long period of time. And I had heard rumors that your grandfather had talked about it. I don't know. Sometimes people say things and they don't really mean it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to sell this place. Maybe it was true, right? Mm-hmm. So I said, well, at the time I had some people that were interested in investing. And so I went and talked to him. And he said, yeah, I'll sit down and talk to you. And we struck a deal. And it was a done deal. And it just, for reasons I don't want to get into too many of the details, but on the investment side, it kind of fell apart a little bit. And it just didn't materialize. And your grandfather was gracious enough to just say, all right, we'll just end this deal.
Which is crazy because, I mean, my dad tells a story. He's on his honeymoon in October of '88. He gets a call from his father and tells him, hey, it's sold. And this is after he's been here for 2 years. This is his full-time job. I mean, he was in the construction business prior, but then decided to leave Root Brothers Construction, come over to the Speedway, and he got a phone call, said he's out of a job.
I'm sure he was devastated at that point. I honestly didn't know that was going to be kind of I didn't know.
Well, it's not on you.
No, but I didn't know that was an expected secession.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I don't think it was clear. That's the problem. That's kind of the classic a Root problem in the whole any kind of business. That's what happened to a Root Brothers too. So
yeah,
it's just a crazy story that it's kind of people don't know that.
Yeah, and it was a tough time because I had to go back to your grandfather and say, listen, things didn't work out behind the scenes, and I'm not sure how we're going to pull this off now.
In that apparently short time where it might have worked out for you, what was your vision?
My vision was not to change a whole lot and just kind of play it as it goes.
Yeah.
You have the rosy glasses, right? I mean, at the time I was a competitor, and you think you can do better, and I'm going to do more for the competitors and all of this stuff, and it probably wasn't a smart move to get involved and to be tainted by being a competitor. Right. I think it would have been bad business decisions at that time.
And we talk about it every now and then on the show. I think we touched on it in Jackie's, how this business is kind of just crazy, right? It's just up and down, and you see so many people come and go that own tracks, and I think I want to say thank you to Dan Avery, because otherwise I wouldn't have a job.
Right.
But so that kind of comes apart. You're on the tour. You raced on the tour for a long time. You hit all the tracks. I mean, that's when the tour was really, like you said, really hit its stride.
Yes.
What were some of your favorite tracks, besides Stafford in the park, to go to on the modified tour? Some
of my most favorite tracks to go to were the ones I hated the most the first time I went there. So first time I went to Watkins Glen, I was scared out of my mind running that place. And the same with New Hampshire.
Yep.
I went to New Hampshire, and I pulled in the pits after the first practice, and my crew chief came over, and I had my hands on the steering wheel like this. And he's like, "What's wrong?" I go, like that. I just shook my head, He takes my fingers, and he peels them off the steering wheel.
Was it just because it was so fast?
It was so fast.
Wow.
And I wasn't accustomed to that. I mean, I'm used to quarter-mile stuff and, a little bit here at Stafford and Thompson. And the interesting story is Steve Park's father, Bob Park, he was kind of in the twilight of his career, so he wasn't like a front runner, but he was still a good runner, but in kind of like the back. I don't want to, but kind of the back of the pack, right? So I'm in the back of the pack, and I don't know what the hell to do. This is my second race now, right? So all of a sudden, he blows right by me on the outside, and I go, well, if he can do that, I can do that. Because I wasn't going to take that from Bob Park. Yeah. You know what I mean? He starts passing cars on the outside, and I'm watching him, and he's working the draft, and I said, wow. Next thing I know, I'm like running 15th after being like 40th.
Because you followed him.
Because I followed him. I learned. And then I started to like the place. But then I realized I needed more motor. So we got a good motor, and we went a little better after that.
Did they put their restrictor plates on like immediately there? Or how did that work?
When I got there, they had already been running that track. I don't know if the restrictor plates were on in the first race. What year was the first race up there? 1990. I think I didn't get there until like 95 or 6 or something. So we had restrictor plates when we ran there.
So it was a true draft.
It was a true draft. Yeah. And it was the older configuration. It was a flatter track, which was nicer for the modifieds. It was actually better racing in the mid-90s with the modifieds than what it is now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good racing now, but
it's pretty nuts. Yeah.
It was better then.
And then, so at that time, the modified tour had 25 events a year. It was a lot of travel. How did you put together a team that was able to do that?
On a shoestring.
Yeah.
It really was. I mean, I had no full-time, nothing. A lot of these tour teams now, they have at least a full-time crew chief, right? Working on a car every day. I didn't have that. It was all guys at night, volunteer, and I scraped money together to, pay for the fuel and pay for the tires. I mean, I had help. I had sponsors, through the years that helped me out. It wasn't all on my own by any stretch of the imagination. I have a lot of people that helped me through the years. I could never name them all. There's so many that have helped me out.
Some button up the Riverside Park years. You won the 95 track championship.
Yep.
Finished second, though, in the title before that. 91, 92, 93, 94. How frustrated were you going into 95? How motivated were you going into 95 after finishing runner-up 4 consecutive years before finally getting that title?
It's pretty frustrating. And the sick part about that is it was mechanical almost every time. And 2 times in a row, 93 and 94, Ben used to have these double point shows. And it was near the end of the season, like August. And both times, 2 years in a row, the universal joint seized up on my drive shaft. I was like, how could this be?
Twice.
Yeah,
jeez.
And it always happens at double point.
And it happened on a double point. I would be leading the points by like a whole race going in to that double point, and now I'm trailing by a whole race to finish out the year. It's like, what the heck?
Yep.
Yeah. And so the park closes. You're still on the tour, and you say you just decide to retire in 2004. You said,
yeah.
Why?
I had great times with the people that I was working with at the time. It was Gary Tito's car, and he gave me pretty much everything I needed, but I wasn't having any fun.
I mean, that's tough.
It was a grind. I don't think my guys were doing as good a job as they should have been doing. I'm not knocking anybody, but it just wasn't clicking like it was when we were running the park and winning championships and stuff like that. I just said, I'm just not having fun. I said, I'm not going to do this. And I called up Gary and I says, I'm just not going to do this anymore. I said, maybe you should either get Tony back in the car, Tony Papali, or maybe Eddie Flumke, because he knows these cars. It was a race work car. I says, I think you will have better success with Eddie. And they did.
So you just called it quits.
Yep.
And I'm done.
Yep.
And then do you come to the races
my
after
next
that?
question.
I mean, is it just
I went to
done?
a few. I mean, I was done
Yeah.
for a few years. And actually, I don't think I went to another race until that 09 year.
Wow.
When you saw Ted?
Yeah. My
Wow.
friend said, what do you say we go to the races? And I go, Tony, you know that if I do that, what's going to
He's
happen?
back on the wagon.
And he knew it.
Yeah,
That's what he was after.
Yeah.
And the rest, they say, is history. I went to the races, and the next thing you know, we're getting another car.
And so, I know we talked about getting the initial car, but it's almost 10 years apart here on coming back, and you're coming back to an SK. The SKs I think are dramatically different from the beginning of in 2000, or even from back when you were racing in the 80s. But the modifieds are just drastically different. The competition in you came back in 2012 or
2010.
2010. I mean, it's different. The sport is different.
Way different.
What was it like?
It was very ultra competitive. But what's amazing is I found it to not be as competitive as it is now.
Really?
Yeah. In 2010, but by 2012 it had changed.
Yeah.
That there was a little small window of not quite as competitive, it seemed like. Like the equipment wasn't everybody.
It wasn't elite.
It wasn't elite, right.
It is now. I mean, now
it's incredible. I mean, all the equipment, every car that shows up is top shelf.
Have to.
If you don't, you're done.
Yeah.
You might as well stay home.
So then, 2010, it was right on the cusp there.
Yeah.
So did you kind of have a chance to kind of reacquaint yourself and then?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that was the thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I actually found it. Once again, to not use the term easy, but it wasn't as tough as I thought it was going to be. that first year, because I found myself competitive pretty much out of the box.
Mm-hmm. That's encouraging, yeah.
Yeah, and it got my confidence up, you know. And I can remember Spring Sizzler again, heat race. I don't remember how they started. We drew like third, and I think Teddy and somebody else was on the front row. And they, of course, you know, Teddy being Teddy, they bumped going into the first turn, and I just went underneath both of them. And I took the lead in the heat race, and I won the heat race first time out.
You're like, yeah, I'm back. Yeah.
Yeah, a little help from Teddy.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you get the win in 2013, 31 years after your last win. It's still one of the great stories of the last
that was awesome.
20 years
I
here
remember.
at
That was
Stafford
cool.
Speedway.
Yeah.
What was that night like, going back to Victory Lane, a different location than I think what it was in 1982?
Yeah.
But pretty cool,
It
nevertheless.
was pretty cool. It was a really cool night. And actually, the 2016 story stands out more.
Okay.
That's my last win.
Yep.
And some people would say, well, he started on the pole. Well, I'll tell you what. I started on the pole. All right.
Doesn't matter. You won the race.
I had to restart next to Keith Rocco 8 times.
Wow.
Not that we're counting.
Wow.
And I beat him.
You beat him 8 times.
And
then.
I beat him. So that to me, that was another one of those heart-pounding events. I said, oh, I got to do it. I got to do it. I'm, you know. And then I got so close to the end of the race, I said, I'm not letting this slip away. And it almost did a couple of times, because the car I had, actually at that time was Stosh was setting up the car, and it was a soft setup, and it didn't fire off quick. It took a couple of laps to get heat in the front tires and to get going. So Keith was like right there.
He's good on the top, too.
Yeah, he was good on the top. And there was a couple of times when I think he could have maybe chopped me a little bit, but he drove me nice and clean, fair. You know, I mean, he didn't give me anything, but he was fair. And, wow, I mean, he made me work on those restarts.
Those are the best ones.
Yeah.
Those are the best ones.
I have to say that race was probably the hardest I ever worked for a race.
Really? In your whole career?
In my whole career.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it was a sweet victory then.
It was a sweet victory.
and so you become a car owner here.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come about? You hook up with Glenn Areen, and I think want to say 2017?
It was about that time, yes. 16,
yeah,
17.
it was around that time.
How did that come together, and why become a car owner?
Well, I dabbled just a little bit, because I don't remember who it was, but somebody might have been in a route that set me down for a week. Might have been your dad.
What, set you down for what?
For something that happened on the track.
Parked you for a week.
Parked me for a week. And Woody sent me a message, and he says, hey, you want me to wheel your car? I was like, yeah, all right. So the car was just sitting anyway. So he kind of got me a little bit like into that car owner mentality, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then the deal with Glenn, that goes back a long way.
I said he was a fan of yours 20 years ago at Riverside Park, or more than that now.
So we went to a car show. It was at Porter and Chester Institute, which was my sponsor at the time. Mid-'90s, probably 94, 95, somewhere around there. This little kid shows up, and he wants to get in my car. And I'm like, no kid's getting in the car. No. And I had the window net up, and he keeps bugging me, and I said, fine, all right. I said, I'll let you sit in the car, but don't touch any pedals. So I put the window net down. Well, it turned out it was Glenn Reen.
Wow, that's cool.
He was probably like 8 years old or 10 years old at the time. We actually have a photo of that from back then when he was a little kid. I have that on the wall, and then we took another photo of him sitting in my car when he's an adult.
That's awesome.
And I don't really remember. I think it might have been my co-car owner, Tony. And I think he said, hey, I've been watching this kid in SK Lights up at Stafford. You really ought to, take a look at him and see, maybe do something with him in the future. And that's how it, I think we actually started as competitors. We were racing against each other here, but think Tony knew him, and we just started getting to know each other. And he would tell the stories about how he went to Porter and Chester, and we got familiar with each other. And then when the opportunity came, I said, "No, I'll tell you what, I'm going to get a couple of new Troyer cars, and I'll put you in one of them." And that's how that happened.
Is he back again this year in that car?
Right now, the 10 and the 17 are on hold.
Okay.
I committed to the 22, and to be honest with you, part of it is I kind of was thinking about doing something with the Open with Glenn.
Yeah.
He's been having a little bit of a rough go with the SKs the last couple of years, but I love Glenn. Don't get me wrong.
Great personality, yeah.
Great personality, and he helps out a lot in the shop, with my stuff and with his own stuff. So there's a lot to be talked about and thought about with that program.
Yeah. And so as a car owner, you have a bunch of victories now, including an SK5K, a victory. That's a big win. That's kind of become a marquee event for the SK Modified. So that's impressive.
Really proud of that one.
And you got a great driver in that, Chase Dowling, and he's committed to this season to get that title.
Yes, he wants to go for the championship. To back up on Glenn, though, one accomplishment that he did do that was really proud moment was he won the inaugural TC race. He did an unbelievable job winning that race with a car that was kind of tore up, and he did a good job.
That was the cool one, the inaugural shootout, and that was great crowd on hand.
Yes.
And very fun night.
Yes, very good.
Yeah.
So those, as a car owner, those two wins stand out for me. I got a TC13, and I got the 5K with two different drivers, so it's a pretty proud moment.
That's awesome.
Do you miss the driver's seat?
I haven't left the driver's seat.
I was going to say, are we going to see Dan Avery in the seat this year?
You're going to see me at some point in somewhat of a limited basis. I'm pretty much done with the grind of the every week. I want to be able to take off and go somewhere with my wife and do whatever. Who knows? It might be a horse show. It might be a dog show. She's big time into those sports, and she's real good at it. And she kind of teaches me how to be better with that stuff.
The one question I have to ask, though, one of the craziest Dan Avery stories things I've ever seen was that fire coming out of the fourth turn, and coming out of the corner, big fire, and all I see is you go straight to your pit stall.
Right.
What? That was crazy.
So
and we'll have to get the video up on the podcast, because that was just one of those, you're like, your jaw's on the floor, and you're like, what the heck just happened?
That was a wild night. Yeah. So coming down into the third turn, we're getting late in the 5K race, the 100-lapper. And I think I was running like sixth at the time, gaining on those guys. Once again, one of those stories, And there was a noise. I hear a noise. Like, it felt like the transmission blow up or something. What had happened is the ring gear on the flywheel exploded and went through the sheet metal on its way out, cut the fuel line. So I look out of the corner of my eye, and I see the flames. And I says, I'm not as young as I used to be. And I'm not as skinny as I used to be. And I'm not going to be able to jump out of my car like Tyler Hines did on the front stretch and get out of that car in seconds. So I said, In a split second, I thought, I got to go to where the fire extinguishers are so they can rescue me. And so I just happened to be coming out of 4. I just turned down pit road, the old access to the pit road, and headed right. I see my crew right there. And I see fire extinguishers next to them, and I headed right for there. And the ironic part about that is the welder, Joey Ham, sees me coming, and he grabs the fire extinguishers and runs. As I'm getting there, he's getting there. The fire department, the fire guys did a great job, but Joey just happened to see me at that moment, grabbed the fire extinguisher and ran and saw it, and it was like we planned it, and he put the fire out.
The interview after that was one of my all-time favorites. It's just Dan's out of the car and just goes, I was on fire. I saw my guys. I gassed it, and I knew they'd pull me out. And that was it. Just like, oh, I love it.
A spectacular moment in your career. We've talked a lot about the wins. Are there any other spectacular moments that maybe not have been caught on videotape that's out there on YouTube?
No, there's not.
Which is a good thing.
Pretty mild.
Yeah.
Pretty mild. I mean, I had a couple of hard hits. One at Thompson with a stuck throttle, and one at Loudon with a blown tire, and broke a few ribs. And my wife yelled at me all the way home because I wouldn't go to the hospital and stuff like that. But no, other than that, it's been a pretty mild career and pretty successful. And I got nothing to be regretful about for sure.
Good. Do we do a little rapid fire here?
Absolutely.
So at the end of the show, we usually just toss out a couple of questions, and the first thing that comes to mind: biggest career victory.
Biggest career victory. I would have to say probably my last win.
Okay.
Here at Stafford.
Here at Stafford.
Held off Keith Rocco.
Held
8
times.
Yeah.
Favorite track that's not Stafford or the Park?
Probably Loudon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Best driver you've ever competed against?
I got to give it to the Reg.
The Reg. Okay.
Yeah.
And are the SKs, or let's put it this way, would it be tougher to win an SK event now or a modified tour event in 1985?
SK event now.
Really?
Yes. Absolutely.
Let's put that on a loop. Well, Dan, we appreciate you coming on the show and coming out. Important part of the Stafford Speedway history. We're glad to have you as a car owner and as a driver some more here, and we hope you stick around for a long time.
We're going to hang out for a little while, and I plan on being in the sport, keep you guys. I got to keep you guys in line.
I like that. I appreciate it.
Thanks for stopping by.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Dan Avery here on the Bottom Shot Podcast.